Ex-Convicts, what is the worst thing you have ever seen a guard do while in prison? Once saw a co stomp the back of an inmate's head and watched the heel of his boot literally scalp the guy. Huge chunk of head meat and hair stuck to a black boot still sits fresh in my memory, yet it was 6 years ago. Same guard was smuggling in spice and heroin. The inmate probably owed a debt is my speculation. Edit, spice as in synthetic marijuana, not common lol. I had a friend whose brother was a prison guard. He had some stories, but the only one I remember was a time when there was a prisoner in solitary for a while. Hollis had become very attached to a praying mantis that had somehow made its way into his cell. The mantis lived with him for quite some time and he loved it like it was his friend. End. One day a prison guard Hullet wasn't aware of the mantis being important to this prisoner, stepped into the cell, saw the mantis, and promptly slammed his hand down on it to kill it. The prisoner was understandably, ably devastated. Ate it. This is so sad. Reminds me of the Green Mile. Ex-convict here. There's a long list of fucked up Sugarth that I've seen, and it's hard to really say which was the worst. Rape and assault is obviously the worst out the gate, but there's a lot of close seconds because of how long the fucked up things would last. Forced semi-starvation is one. Being in lockdown in our cells for weeks or months at a time without being allowed into the commons meant we basically lived as if in solitary confinement. Usually got put on lockdown because someone fucked it up for everyone, but sometimes it was an unwarranted lockdown. Close bracket. It came with a whole host of issues, but lack of food was common. Meals were passed through the doors on trays during lockdown. Accidentally forgetting 3/4 of the meal portions on specific trays, or forgetting certain cells trays completely would mean that an inmate would get just enough food to survive, but would be slowly starved. It was usually just a specific co-Hullet had a grudge against a specific mate vs a collaborative effort. Fought, but knowing that you're going to not get at least 2 of your meals for the day, and having no alternative way to get out of your cell to procure food for weeks at a time was awful. There was also something we called tile therapy. It was when a co would decide that you needed an attitude adjustment and would do a tackle, to restrain you to take you to solitary or your cell instead of simply cuffing or even verbally escorting you. If an inmate fully warranted it, it was not referred to as tile therapy. Tile therapy specifically referred to the hyper-aggressive, completely unnecessary, and violent nature of the takedown in proportion to the offense that determined the need for a takedown. It usually involved smashing the inmate's face into the tile during the initial tackle to stun and subdue them, but would also include a variety of battery and such. For example, a co once broke an inmate's jaw from slamming his head into the tile floor so hard during one such takedown. I don't even remember what the dude supposedly did because it was something so minor, like not having his uniform shirt tucked in. And there was just so much coercion and manipulation and sugar in general. Co's had the power to make your life a living hell if they so desired, and they had a plethora of creative ways to punish you on the books and off. I served 8 years, so I have a lot of stories. Okay, a few stories, as requested. Creative punishments. One unit I was on had a thing about making you run and work out beyond what your body could handle. Run laps until you puke. Do sit-ups for around and a half hour of burpees. Then run till you puke again. If you became weak or fell from exhaustion, you have to add in something else like 15 minutes of mountain climbers. If the whole unit was on punishment, we would have to run single file and circle back a lap to pick up the stragglers. We wouldn't stop until we completed 5 miles without having a straggler. There were times we were out there for hours on end just running. You'd feel like your body went through a meat grinder by time you were done. Being forced to do the co's grunt work was a favorite punishment they doled out. Blood all over a room after some tile therapy. Co doesn't want to clean it up. Make an inmate scrub it up as punishment, etc. Never was given proper PPE or materials for cleaning. I was forced to clean so many bloody rooms without proper supplies that I was legitimately concerned about my risk for contracting bloodborne pathogens. One of the first things I did when I got out was go get tested for HIV, Hep C, and anything else they could test me for. Dehumanizing punishments were just about as bad. Because of the toll it takes on you mentally, one person took too long in the shower, and when asked why, they said they felt extra dirty/stinky and was just trying to scrub up extra. Shared showers was legit. Co-decided punishment for the infraction of going over shower time would be a publicly announced shower program to correct a hygiene issue and having to take a 10-minute shower every hour for a week. So basically outed them as being crusty with such bad hygiene they had to shower constantly, which made them a target for harassment from other inmates. Then there was the hassle and discomfort of having to shower constantly on top of the embarrassment. And on that unit, the showers were just one big room with the spigots lined up on a wall. And the rule was there must always be at least one to supervise the showers, presumably to prevent rapes. So they had to strip down and shower in front of another person every hour. Very dehumanizing. There's also the tampon tax. Co-decides you're using way too many feminine products and rations them out. Decides the number you can use, which is always grossly under what you need. You are then forced to sit in bloated soaked pads or just free bleed. I'd been subjected to that one way too many times and fucking hated it. And before anyone tells me just don't do the punishment, i.e. refuse to run or clean, let me tell you that it's not really an option. Sure, you can technically refuse, but your punishment will be significantly worse if you do. I spent several weeks in solitary confinement for the infraction of nuisance contraband for having too many books. This infraction coincidentally came after refusing to clean up a particularly awful mess. I got to showers the entire time I was in solitary, and I was never allowed to have my legally required hour a day out of my cell. Also, it took me 3 years to earn a certain privilege level, and I lost all my privileges after the infraction of obscuring security's line of sight for setting my water bottle in the windowsill. That infraction was also coincidentally after another refusal. They make you jump through so many hoops to earn the smallest privileges that make life tolerable, but then yank them away at the slightest offense. If you piss off a they literally have the quality of your life in their hands. Serving a long sentence already drains your soul, but it sucks so much worse when you have no privileges. Shiite. Thank fudged you're out now! Exclamation mark. Can I ask, what were you in for? Question mark. I'm a and one of the worst things I ever saw was an officer kidney punch a handcuffed inmate. Naturally, I reported it. That officer is now a deputy warden. Specifically, my deputy warden. True story. Sucks good people like you can't get that position, instead some animal does. Well, I applied for a DW position in another facility. I will never promote any further in this one under the current leadership this last summer and didn't make the second round of interviews. So at this point, I'm thinking lateral movement out will be the only alternative at present. I worked at a maximum facility and I was super respectful. No need not to be ever. And the men there were always super respectful back. It's frustrating that other officers didn't realize this, and administration didn't realize that the same officers WH lot kept having issues because they were starting it. I really enjoyed my job. I was super strict because I have a fear of getting in trouble. Bleh. I communicated well and seriously never had issues. UES. My favorite memory was I was working straight 16 to 17 hour shifts for 27 days in a row before I was scheduled for a major surgery. Airy. The inmates knew because it was a small prison and no one keeps their mouth shut lol. But I was sitting in the guard box on the yard and I looked at my watch and it was 1700 and blinked and it was 1800 and an inmate is tapping on the window. Dow, letting me know second shift was on. So I wouldn't get in trouble. Bleh. I obviously didn't mean to fall asleep. Eep. I was just exhausted. Ted. It was just a super nice thing to do. I used to be a and I agree. A mutual respect goes a long way. You're here. You've got to serve your time. I'm here just doing my job. When you're new, the inmates know it, and they'll try to take advantage of you. Maybe even further it to blackmail you. Stick to training and the rules. Be respectful but don't tolerate BS. If anyone is screwing around, escalate it to a superior. Once you set that ground layer, inmates aren't going to try to give you a hard time if you aren't giving them one. For the most part. So many co's are on a fucking power trip, and ironically they're the most miserable fucks that work there. Says a lot about them. Something else in their life isn't adding up. My friend was in prison recently and told me this story. They were caught with drugs in their cell. The correctional officer came in with 6 to 8 jugs of rotten milk, popped off the lids, and set them down in the cell. He told the inmates he'd remove the jugs the next day, as long as they were still full, i.e. can't flush them down the toilet. Apparently it was a long night of gagging and being miserable. They tried to take shifts covering the jugs with their hands, but of course it was mostly futile. That said, he said it was a better alternative than the hole or other more accepted punishments. Apparently some prisons are trying to phase solitary out, and revulsion-based punishments are one alternative some places are using. Definitely stopped any of them from hiding drugs in the cell in the future, mostly out of fear of the fellow inmates kicking one's ass if they knew you risk getting that punishment for the whole cell again. A friend W. Harlot did time in a federal prison. Told me that the intimidation by the guards is far worse than that by other inmates. For the feds I would say so, because people in fed prison are not always hardened criminals. You'll have a prison of hard asses, then a prison for white collar crime, then a prison for pedophiles / non-violent. Supermax is bad. You have to be a tough bastard to work or live that. The other two aren't shit. It'd be easy to intimidate someone for those. I don't know that prisons are really segregated to that extent. My friend is in prison and there are pedos, non-violent, and violent offenders. Probably some white collar crime too. One of my favorite things to do was toss cells looking for contraband. It was like a treasure hunt to me. I always was very respectful with inmates' stuff. It could be what most would perceive as nothing, but I respected the inmates' belongings as I would want someone to with mine. If they had a clean locker, I would move things and then arrange the on their bed or another already searched area neatly so when they returned to their cell, they could put things back neatly and efficiently. I had prisoners requesting that I do their checking when it came time. I did my job well and was known for finding a fair amount of contraband. Now I had a coworker W. Harlotok what you might call the opposite apro. Atch. If he could break, eek, ruin or destroy property. RTY, he did with glee. Lee. Head open food packages. Jez. Accidentally spill. Ill. Throw out photos or anything of the sort. Ot. I watched him throw an inmate's legal folder in the toilet and in a separate incident. Ent. Tear up photos of an inmate's kids. He was an asshole. Oh. I reported him naturally. LLY. But was basically told that I should appreciate his tenacity. Itty. I only lasted 6 months in that environment and was glad to switch roles to being the JED teacher. Which was way better. Dare. I never understood why exactly the inmates weren't allowed pictures of their family. It always sucked finding photos while booking them in and having to put them in their folder to be given back at release, whenever that would be. However, I did find one guy yanking it to a picture of what I assume was their much older wife. Definitely not their mother. No, surely not. I spent a weekend in a city jail / processing facility, not a full-blown jail / prison, due to a DUI. Yes, I was a fucking idiot. I got 3 interesting stories out of it. 1. There was a guy in solitary across the room banging on the door. Obviously it's steel, but it still seemed like he might somehow break it. He was screaming, "They sold my witch crack," over and over. I saw 4 guards line up with riot gear and batons and go in. I just heard blows landing, and I saw clothes flying out of the cell. They marched that man out of the cell, and he looked like that scene in Con Air where they bag and tag them. I was a little more nervous after that. 2. When in the drunk tank with 15 or 20 other dudes. One dude was sitting on the back of the toilet, i.e. where the tank in theory would be, with his feet on the seat. Another guy came up and said he needed to use it. He said go ahead, and just spread his legs. We were all a little taken back. 3. I spent the entire night talking and getting to know 2 different guys. They both seemed very nice, like they were picked up for something stupid. We get in front of the judge, and it turns out he had beaten someone within an inch of their life earlier that night. Just goes to show you never can tell. On another note, I expected it would be incredibly locked down. However, all the cell doors were open, and while you're expected to stay in your cell, in theory you could have wandered all around that area. Kind of surprised me. I won't say where and when, but when I arrived, the staff opened 2 cell doors to an empty day room floor. My cellmate, not having much to do except be nosy, stared out the window. It happened quickly, but he immediately recognized what was going on, and Matador Suga, here we go again. I went to look. From one door appeared a one-armed skinhead W. Howlett walked towards the only other cell. Open. A kid, alone in his new cell, poked his head out to see why they cracked his door. He saw the skinhead and froze up. The skinhead pushed him inside and fucked him up. I later found out it was staged fighting by the guards. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.